Hello everyone, welcome back to another coding tutorial. So on this tutorial, we are going to continue our adventure in exploring our loops that we will be using in Java. The last coding tutorial, we covered our for loops. This one, we will cover our while loops, and that will include do while as well. So let's go ahead and hop right in. So there are going to be cases where loops are used not only just to count, but they are also used for other things, such as if you're uncertain about a certain situation or a certain outcome. So this would be used if you want to run your loop until a specific condition is met or until it changes, or basically it's used when you don't necessarily know exactly how many laps or runs your loop will need to take. So to give you an idea, we'll go ahead and apply it to a common example such as like a guessing game. So in our case, we'll go ahead and just apply our scanner so that you can see how all of these concepts we've been covering so far in this series connect. So we'll go ahead and import our scanner, and we'll just create a scanner object. Excuse me, let me fix this. Put that under here. All right. And here we're going to create a scanner right here to use. So scanner input equals new scanner system.in. All right, so we have a scanner object created, and basically we can then use that scanner. So let's say here we want to do a print statement. So we're going to ask our user to enter a number like so. And then we want to say that int guess is going to equal our input dot next int. All right. So that is what we have just to get our loop set up, because we will be using this within our loop. So let's say we are going to create our number, and we're going to put a value to it. And that's going to be our number to guess. So now we can start our while loop. So basically, we can have a loop that will allow the user to continue to guess what the number is. And to do that, we can create our while loop by simply doing something similar to this. Now, it is going to be a little different from how our for loops had the initialization, the condition, the update. In this case, we're just going to place a condition. And so our condition that we want to check in this case is to see if guess is the same as our number. So what we can do is just say while guess is not equal to our number, because that will allow it to run. So we could say while guess is not equal to number. And this is basically saying as long as the user does not guess the correct number, we want to continue to ask them to enter their guess. So we could say system.out.print line and say enter your guess, and we'll say 1 through 30. And we could also tell them like a message like, sorry, your guess is incorrect. All right. So we have that. So basically, so far what we have is a while loop. And basically what's going to happen is the loop is going to check this condition. So it's basically saying if guess is not equal to the number, then we want to run anything that's in the loop. So currently our guess, we don't necessarily know what the user entered. But in the case that they entered something that was incorrect, it should tell them that. And so right now we're basically telling them, hey, um, you know, your number or your guess is incorrect. Please try again. And then you can allow them to use the scanner again. So what you could do in this case is say guess is going to be equal to scanner dot next int. All right. So, oops, we named ours input. So let me change that. All right. So now we technically have this, which will allow the user to enter a new number. And it's going to continue to run. Now, what we'll do outside of the loop is put a print statement so we know if the condition is met, because our loop will continue to run until the condition is met, and then it will continue to run the remainder of the code. So we'll say here, you finally guessed the right number. All right. So this is a simple example of using scanner while also using a while loop. So we'll go ahead and test out our code and see. Hit the wrong thing. Hit the debug function. Let me close those out. All right, run here. All right, so you say here it says enter a number. We'll go ahead and put 12, for example. And it says, sorry, your guess is incorrect. Enter your guess. We'll put 1. Sorry, it's incorrect. We'll put 3. Sorry, it's incorrect. And just because we know what the number is, we'll put 24. And there it is. It said you have finally guessed the right number. So basically, in that example, we did not know how many times our user was going to get it wrong. So we could not use a for loop because we didn't know how many times it would take them to guess the number. However, in the same guess the number example, a for loop will be useful if we wanted to give our user a set number of tries, such as they have 5 tries to guess it. However, if we want to give them as many tries as possible, then we would use a while loop. So that is the clear difference between the two. And you see there is technically no counter here because we didn't really need it. We're just basically saying we want to run this loop as long as this condition is true. So as soon as a user put in a number that made that condition false, the loop stopped running and it continued to run any lines of code after that point. So, for example, on the first try, if the user was to get it correct off the first try, and our number is 24, then you see it just skipped right over this whole section. So we never see that come out because the condition was false. So these 2 lines never ran. But if the condition was true, they would run as we previously saw. So basically, it skipped all of this and immediately went to the next line of code that we had in our file. So that is basically how your while loops will run. Now, there's also your do while loop. So this is a little different. And this is going to force the body of your loop to pretty much run at least once. So a good way to do this is like if you're working with some sort of menu or choice option. So For example, we could say we are going to create an option. So we'll say int user choice equals, and we'll say our input dot next int. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to use this in our loop, but before I do that, I am going to pretty much come here and we're going to check it. So what we will do is we will create our do while. So we'll say do, and then we need to end it with a while. And the while should have parentheses around it, similar to this. So that is the appropriate do while. Now that we have the do while created, we basically are going to use this within it. So now we're going to create a menu interface. So what we're going to do is, obviously we need to print out to our user what's going on. And we're going to say menu options. And then we're going to also do another print statement, or a few. So actually, let me paste this so we can use it. And then we'll go here. So we'll say system.out.println. And I'm just going to set up the structure so I can copy and paste that and use it a few times. So we're going to say one is, let's say, deposit. And here we'll say 2 is withdraw, and we'll put 3 is exit. Okay, so we're basically making like sort of an ATM option, right? So we have this menu, then we're going to tell our user that they need to enter a number. And then they can work with that. So basically, we have a menu that would run at least once by default. Now we need a condition for it to stop. So what we can do is put in an option like user choice. And in this case, our exit is attached to 3. So we could say while our user choice is not equal to 3, then we want to create some sort of loop. And this case is throwing it because it technically can't find it, because again, please remember that any variables that you use in a loop only exist in the loop. So because I created this variable inside of the loop, it's not registering it properly. So what we can do here is we're going to take this out, just the int part, and I'm going to put it outside, and we'll say int user choice like that, and then it fixes it. And I'm just going to write that there so we know. Variable for a do while loop. So now we can run it with no problem, and let's go ahead and test that out. All right, so remember our first one was a while loop, a while loop, and we know our number is 24, so that's not what we're covering, so I just go ahead and put in the right number. But then you see our next option shows up, and it's saying enter a menu number. So if I enter 1, then you see the menu popped up again. If I enter 2, you see the menu pops up again. If I enter 3, you see that it pretty much exits our menu. So that is basically where your do while is useful if you want to allow a user to continuously see a set numbers of options first and then allow them to enter in a choice or make a decision. Now, to expand on this, you could, inside of your do while loop, put some more input. For example, if user choice is equal to 1, oops, didn't do that right. Back up. There we go. Then we're going to say we want to print option 1. And again, I'm not going to go into detail to make a full system, but just to kind of give you an idea of what you can do. And then we could say else if your user choice is equal to number 2, then we want to do this. And you see how it's getting a little bit more complex with our code. And now we're combining a bunch of different concepts we've already covered, such as your scanners, such as your do whiles, your conditionals, your variables. We're combining everything we have learned so far now together to make a more comprehensive and interactive program. And here we'll just say option 2 again for quick purposes. All right. So far we have that set up. Save it, and we're going to go ahead and test this as well. So again, it's going to ask for our first part, which was our for loop. So we're going to enter in our number. We're going to go ahead and click 1. And then you see it printed out to us option 1. So of course we could have kept expanding on it and putting more information or things to print out for option 1. But this is just to show you the different ways you can do this. You hit option 2. It says option 2 in the output. So it's basically allowing you to have different controls based on the user selection. And again, to exit out of here, we can hit 3. Now, after we hit 3, we could have put a print statement that says menu has ended or something like that. But again, those are some things you can consider when you're creating your code. So overall, that is a do while loop. So basically, the main portion is the condition at the bottom of the while loop. This is what is going to stop your menu from constantly showing up. So without your user pressing for the option 3 to exit, the loop will continuously run. All right. So that is a good example there. Now, another case you can use is that sentinel loop or the sentinel value that I was speaking of. So we'll cover that briefly as well. So sentinel. And those are basically used to signal the end of the loop. All right. And for this, we can just go ahead and put some print statements. So we could say enter in a number or enter in prices. So let's say that, enter in prices. And then we'll say type -1 to finish. All right. So that's a little message we can show to our users. And then when you're working with sentinel values, you can pretty much use a while loop and use a Boolean within it. So true, typically. So you're basically saying while something is true, then we want to do this. And in this case, we're going to do, for example, double total equals 0 just to set it up. And now that we have this set up, we can then go into our code and start working with it. But again, if we're asking a user to enter in something, we need to pretty much have a variable on the outside of our loop that can be created that we can use inside of it. So now we have those two. So price is going to hold our input. So we'll say price is going to equal input dot next double. So it's going to take that price, and then once we get the price, we can check to see if the price is -1. So if price is equal to -1, then we want to say break. Now break is like our panic button. So it immediately ends your loop. Okay? It's basically like saying, hey, I don't want to do this. Let's stop this loop from running if -1 is there. Now, if it's not, then we could say total is going to then plus equals our price. And I'm throwing some concepts I didn't necessarily cover, but as we are working with it, there are just some good tips you can use when working with loops. The first one is break, which again will immediately like end the loop no matter what. And this here, the plus equals, is basically saying total is going to equal total plus expense. So it's basically like saving you from typing in total twice. It's just like a shorthand. So it's basically going to update our total with entered prices. All right. Now, outside of the loop, let's go ahead and just place a print statement and say the total is, and we'll go ahead and add total. All right. And that is an example of how our Sentinel value works. In our case, our Sentinel value is 1 or -1. All right. Oops. All right. So let's go ahead and test that and see what we have. So again, running through those other loops we created, we'll go ahead and just do 3 to get over this. So now you see we're at our new loop. It's running and it says enter prices and then type -1 to finish. So we're going to enter a price. So I'll say $12.99. It's not saying anything. So when it does that, we can keep typing in the price and just keep going. Okay. And then as soon as I hit -1 and click enter, then you see it cancels out of our loop and it immediately shows us our price. So that is an example of a Sentinel value with a while loop. So you see our while loop does not necessarily have a major condition. It just simply says while true, then we're going to do this. And because it's true, when we get here, it's going to break it out of the loop. So it's not that we had a condition that necessarily changed the loop, which truthfully, another way we could have had the loop stop was to make this change from true to false. But because we use this break, which is our end all, immediately stop the loop based on this condition, then it stopped it. So that is also another way that you can stop your loops from running under a certain condition, and it allows you to have more control. So overall, that is how you cover your loops. Again, this is basic. I'm not doing a deep dive because, again, the longer you sit and try to understand too many examples, the harder it will be. So I'm just providing you with the very basics that you need to understand the concept and get your feet wet from that perspective. So in the last coding tutorial, we covered our for loops. In this one, we covered our while loops as well as our do while loops, and even looking at those Sentinel values so that you can begin working with loops on your own. So again, I always recommend that you do more research and practice this yourself because this topic and the topics following get a little bit more complex than the ones we've covered before, so they will take a lot more time to fully understand. But once you understand them, they are a very great tool that you can use within your code. So hopefully this wasn't too hard to understand. And I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all back in our next lecture video.